Great pleasure for me to introduce Chris Salter, which is an artist and professor of design and computation arts at the Concordia University and co-director of the Hexagram Network for Arts, Culture and Technology. Salter works explore the borders between the senses, arts, design, and new technologies through large-scale installation, as well as books, critical writings, and lectures on the international scene. His immersive and physically experiential works are informed by theater, architecture, visual arts, computer music, perceptual psychology, and so on. And today, his talk is called Polieri Amongst the Neurons, Scénographie in the Age of AI. So we look forward to hear you. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Merci, merci Franck and Federico pour l'invitation. Sorry, désolé, je parle aujourd'hui anglais. We had some problems with the video, and so I'm going between two computers right now. So just bear with me. So as you said, I'm Chris Salter. I actually am no longer at Concordia University. I'm at the Zurich University of the Arts. I'll talk about that in a second. As the introduction said, I'm an artist and also a scholar, and also now also a research manager, running a new lab in the Zurich University of the Arts called the Immersive Art Space. These are 3 books that I've published. The most recent is Sensing Machines, all from MIT Press. But I think I've been invited today to talk about my work in Entangled, which is a book written in 2010 focused on the relationship between technology and performance over the 20th century, of which Polieri fits or plays a very big role in. But quickly, just to give you a framework, so as I'm at the Zurich University of the Arts, I'm running a new space called the Immersive Art Space, which is a 3-year-old space that's dedicated to teaching, research, and production in the area of the so-called immersive arts. This is the space. It's a very large black box theater. And the reason I'm talking to you about this is because this is very much a frame around the question of scenography and where scenography is going in the 21st century. So the immersion comes up a lot. I will talk about it in a little bit. But the genre of immersion very much focuses on the relationship of the human body to the technological environment that we are increasingly embedded within. These are some examples of work from the Immersive Art Space. And the space involves a team of research associates, graduates from the ZHDK and other universities that have backgrounds in computer science, in media studies, in interaction design and game design, and computer music, film production, and so on. And what's interesting is this space is an interesting kind of laboratory to explore the kind of futures of immersion, and which scenography plays a big role. Someone seems to be chatting here on Zoom as usual.
Oui, il faut avoir des pauses. I need you to make stops. Okay, because it will not be a simultaneous interpretation anymore. It must be consecutive.
Okay, all people there speak English, so the translator is just for the people on Zoom.
Okay. We were just hearing that. So the space is 2 things. It's a physical space where we can test out potential futures for the mix between, let's say, human bodies and in technological environments. And at the same time, it's a conceptual site, which links the different departments of the ZHDK together. So again, there's some images of it. And what's interesting is that it's a kind of, it takes on this idea of what the interaction designer and anthropologist Lucy Suchman called a configuration, how a technology would materialize a certain kind of imaginary, and how those imaginaries create the possibilities of new technologies. All right, so I'm going to start back with Polieri and a quote from Le Théâtre Kaleidoscopique from the Le Revue Théâtrale in the 1950s, where he said, The theater of tomorrow will be a theater of introspection and abstraction, utilizing in all ways the whole range of spectacle, in orchestration of sound, light, shapes, colors, and life itself. All right, but what I want to argue here, and I'm going to show you some examples of recent projects of mine and my team, both in Canada as well as in Zurich, is that we're moving from thinking about scenography as what Denis Bablet said, a visual battle between space and image, and instead more to one which is invisible, in which the processes of computing, of algorithms, of prediction, and the agency that comes off of those systems will basically be the dominant force in scenography for the future. All right, so now you have to help me get back since I'm not a PC man. Okay, yeah, let's see if anything shows up. There's probably no audio either. Or let's try the audio and see. Yeah.
Experience where the senses start to merge and mix together. Visitors arrive. And
so this is a project from 2017 to give you some example of where we might be going.
And one also feels vibration. People put on these goggles, which basically cloud their vision, and then they move through a series of rooms that have varying levels of sensory input. You don't really have a sense of depth. You only see other people moving as shadows that emit light. So there's a kind of weird communication happening between each body in the room. And then you start to move through the other spaces. Occasionally the room completely becomes white. At times it becomes very, very dark. Suddenly, the walls seem to emit light. The final space is saturated in a kind of dim color, which is changing very gradually. In many ways, the visitor's experience is the content of the work. There's an incredibly wide range of experiences that people describe, from terror to ecstasy to a kind of meditative state. I see my work as a relation between people and their environments and how those things are merging and interacting with each other.
Okay, so this is a project called Haptic Field, which deals with, let's say, a scenography of touch. This is a project from 2019 called Sense Factory, which explores the work of the Hungarian artist and teacher Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, where we reimagined a project that he wanted to do in the 1920s called the Theater of Mechanical Eccentric, but never realized. And this is a huge kind of responsive environment that changes according to the number of people, their connections with each other, and the actual architecture of the room. So this room expands and contracts and pushes people against the walls as it changes its shape. This was before COVID, so you can imagine. The behavior of the media in this room is driven by different kinds of computational processes, including models of neural networks that are basically integrated fire neurons that gather up data and then fire, and that controls the behavior of the light and the sound in the space. But the space is very physical, as you can see. It's constantly changing its shape, blowing up and inflating and deflating, and as I said, kind of transforming how people walk, how people move through the environment in the midst of this kind of media storm. Okay, so those are two examples of our own projects, but I want to now take this back historically to Polieri. And this idea of moving away from scenography as a purely visual concept and something that is, let's say, driven more and more by computational systems. Now, it's interesting because through that, Arnold Aronson, who's a well-known historian of scenography, wrote in a book called The Future of Scenography that he said there's a monumental shift going on in scenography, which is so momentous because new technology calls into question the very notion of theater and performance as we've understood it for about 2,500 years. So for Polieri, these technologies of the future in the 1950s and 1960s and 1970s were essentially both electronic images and the possibility of mouvement total, right, the total movement, which were characteristics for, of course, a kind of whole history of artists in the 20th century. But as I said, now in the 21st century, we're moving away from, let's see, these models of control and models of, let's say, physical movement and more toward how space is being shaped by invisible systems around us. And I want to talk about three ideas that I think are kind of resonant with Polieri's work. One is the idea of participation, one is the idea of interaction, and finally, the last is prediction. And let's just start with a little bit of what we mean by participation. So the British-born American art historian Claire Bishop defines the idea of an installation as, quote, a type of art that the viewer physically enters and which is often described as theatrical, immersive, or experiential, unquote. So what the term installation focuses on, as Bishop says, is a desire to heighten the viewer's awareness of how objects are positioned or installed in a space and our bodily response to this. Installation work creates a situation in which the viewer physically enters and insists that you regard this as a singular totality. So in other words, the human body is at the center of any installation work, whether it's run by computers or whether it's physical spaces. And just images from Duchamp's État donné, through Capro's happenings in the 1960s, to people like Robert Smithson, where you move into land art, where installations occupy very large-scale space, to Spiral Jetty, to Michael Heitzer's City, which actually was just completed after 50 years in the New Mexico desert. You can just see, to Christo, you can see that installation changes scale all the time. And it also moves from indoors to outdoors. So again, these are just examples of the way that space has been shaped, not only by theatrical artists, but by visual artists, architects, scene designers, and so forth. And of course, you end up with someone like Osama. But we can also go back to installation and think about this in the context of scenography. Starting in the 1920s, this is the work of Friedrich Kiesler, the Raumbühne in 1920 in Vienna. This is Kiesler's scenography for the play called Rossum's Universal Robots, RUR, which is the first time the word robot is actually used, a Czech word meaning slave or worker. This is Lyubov Popova, was one of the most important women scenographers in constructivist Russia in the 1920s. This is Lidzitsky. So you can see that all these environments from the theater also involve large-scale design of space and of time. And also what's very interesting is the relation of audiences to these environments. The audience is never sitting, you know, in when we understand the traditional orchestra, but actually around these spectacles. Here, in case of the Winterreise in 1976 in the Olympic Stadium in the winter in Berlin, where the stadium is empty and the audience is moved around in the space. So you can see these examples of scenography which constantly change the relationship between perception and space. And we can think about these, I think, in different ways, perhaps, again, in the context of Polieri in this contemporary context. So one is, think about machine environments which function as performers. So in fact, the environment itself is a kind of machine that either the viewer remains passive or active as they move around within the environment. And we can also think of environments in which spectators play roles or characters that advance a narrative or a sequence of actions. And then we can also think about, of course, environments in which interaction, computer-based interaction, takes place. This is a particularly interesting project called, very unknown, from the 1990s, called the Divina Commedia, Praxis for Death by Tawata and Matsumoto, two Japanese artists, in which essentially 5 audience members lay inside a pool of 5 meters of edible gelatin. And over time, in total darkness, above them, light would flicker and flash. And so the idea was to loosen the sensory motor connection between one's body and the environment. And this is very much inspired by the work of this man, John Lilly, who did work on near-death experiences and also flotation tanks in the 1960s. And then, as I was showing you earlier with Haptic Field, this was originally premiered in Shanghai at the Kronos Arts Center. This was for 20 visitors at a time that wore clothing that involved wireless vibration, haptic actuation. And it's very interesting because the art magazine Frieze stated in an interesting way that this is perhaps what life is like before the mirror stage. This is, of course, this idea of Jacques Lacan that when children or infants look in the mirror, they suddenly don't recognize themselves. So the audience has glasses that are fogged, they can't see, and they go into an environment in which they'll only see and sense other people through the vibration they feel in their own bodies. All right, now this question of interaction. So we can think about interaction as a very specific idea which traced back to the 1960s. And this is where, for instance, cybernetics, which is the science of feedback and control, aim to reimagine audience members as part of a feedback loop between themselves and the environment. And you find already in the 1960s very low-tech examples of this kind of, let's say, electronically augmented interaction. This is already 1965 with Merce Cunningham, John Cage, who built sensors, those antennas which are essentially capacitance sensors that change the electrical field as you move toward them, and also had light-sensitive diodes, which as you got closer, changed the light and also controlled the mixer in the space. This was in 1965. So this idea of interactive was very much this notion of sensing the environment somehow and using that input to transform the environment in what we call real time. And it's interesting because this computer scientist, Myron Kruger, who started work in the 1970s in what he called responsive environments, said that interaction itself becomes the medium. It's not what an environment looks or sounds like, it's actually how it interacts with the participant within it. But as I said, something else seems to be taking place now. On the one side, you have this paradigm of immersion, which is hardly ubiquitous, hardly hidden, where you have these, of course, Van Gogh and Monet-like environments of projection, which, as you can see, is quite an old idea because it goes back to the 1920s and 1930s, where projection was first used in, let's say, physical art or performance spaces. But then, as he said, you also, so these are examples of course, immersion that may you recognize from Team Lab to James Turrell to S. Devlin. But at the same time, you have another shift, and that is this idea of prediction. So you have current software paradigms emerging from computer science, for instance, machine learning or deep learning, and other processes that actually are proposing a pretty radically different model of interaction. So you can see historically that interaction was always about humans in relationship to a changing environment, a technological environment that one could see, that one could interact physically with. But, and humans were very much part of, let's say, part of this loop. But now you have a shift, because what we're starting to use is technical systems that try to predict action as opposed to simply take action and cause it to change something in a space. So you can have examples of this, for instance. These are headlines that are recent. This artificial intelligence takes the stage at the Dresden Opera House. This was in the New York Times about music, science, and healing intersect in an AI opera. This was a performance at Ars Electronica, which is supposedly has the first neural network-based dancer. So you have a lot of these examples, and this I can't show you, but this is a robotic opera driven by an android who conducts an orchestra. So you might wonder what is going on in this crazy set of examples. And what I would argue is, like, so now our much scenography is building up on something like this. These are examples of neural networks. One is a deep neural network, which are the things you're most familiar with because they're running Google and Facebook and helping you choose music on Spotify. But next to that is what's called a spiking neural network, which is a very interesting neural network that produces essentially spikes over time, which is closer to the way our brains function. So going back to Polieri and finishing up, so for Polieri, there's still human agency as a key aspect of this movement total, this theater of movement. But human agency is shifting dramatically in how we are interacting with machines. And it might seem an old idea, because you can see the stage was always imagined as a machine. But the machine was not able to predict human action and how then the environment might change based on those predictions. So in many ways, it's less the case that machines will become the performers as we think, the neural networks will become the performers, but instead, artists will increasingly become like machines. And what I mean by that is not simply like robots, but let's say responding to signals, prompts, patterns, and structures in order to create and make sense of these new kinds of environments. And to finish with just an example, so this is from 2002. This is Theater and Performance Design, which is a Routledge journal about new forms of scenography and new forms of performance space. It's the most well-known journal in scenography. So there's an upcoming edition, or a special edition in the summer of 2023, which will be launched at the Prague Quadrennial in June. The Prague Quadrennial is the largest festival of scenography in the world. It happens every 4 years in Prague. And I edited this issue, and it's focused on the question of capture. And the theme is the following. How do theater and performance practitioners, particularly scenographers and those working with designing new kinds of spaces, performative spaces, how are they grappling with these new computer-based systems of data capture, representation, and display? And how does this idea of capture, and the idea of capture is very interesting. The idea of capture means that the machine needs to understand something about the world that it's in. It's not trying to represent the world. It's trying to understand how humans move and act in that world, and then make a prediction based on that. This is an idea that comes from American computer scientist Philip Agri in the 1990s. So how is this idea of capture, of capturing bodies, of representing them and displaying them inside these scenographic environments, how does that reorganize our thinking about what kinds of actions will take place in these increasingly intelligent stage environments? And of course, you kind of see perhaps the legacy again of Polieri's interest in these transformations of environment, of stage spaces into these intelligent or electronic spaces. But unlike Polieri's vision of a kind of bi- or three-dimensional construction or installing an environment that creates kind of specific actions, special actions, the human representations only remain on the surface. And so we start moving more and more toward, essentially as humans, I think, in designing and trying to understand how to work with these new kinds of scenographic systems that are driven by computing systems. We become more like prompt engineers, or I would find in the final word, pattern seekers, trying to understand the patterns that machines produce and how we will then respond to those. So it's no longer... It's very interesting to think about scenography no longer is about aesthetic expression that is at stake, but how we perceive our own being in these systems where knowledge of what's going on that's diffused among human, machine, and the environment is going to become increasingly opaque. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chris, for your very inspiring talk. That surely I have some issues, but maybe we would like to start a debate, or we shift to the further speaker, Frank. Maybe we take now a moment for the question.
I have one proposition. Gao Ze is online, and perhaps we could hear Gao Ze and Noor from Linz. Noor is online, and she speaks in English too, and Gao Ze is speaking English too. And so after the three talks, perhaps we could to speak together. Okay. Or if some people have one question now in the room for Chris.
That might maybe after.
After, okay.
We will take all the question.
You could introduce Gao Ze. He's online.
Okay, perfect. So in order to introduce Gao Ze, which is also an artist, a media artist, and a researcher based in New York and Hong Kong, and he worked at the Extended Reality and Immersive Media Lab. His research spans a variety of methods and interests, including artificial intelligence, human-computer interaction, museum studies, game design, and virtual and augmented reality. He has a background both in image science and arts. The title of his talk is Scénographie, Symbiosis, Asynchronous Multi-User Interaction in Digital VR Exhibition. We have some...
Non, c'est directement, ça devrait normalement fonctionner directement en régie. On peut envoyer le PowerPoint ou l'animation de Gao. Et Arina, on va abandonner la traduction vu qu'il y a cette option simultanée qui ne marche pas. Comme ça, on écoutera Gao Ze directement en anglais dans la salle, et dans la salle physique à Paris et dans la salle virtuelle sur Zoom. Et on remettra tout en ligne avec les traductions d'une langue à une autre un peu plus tard pour que ce soit beaucoup plus fluide. And so you could introduce Mr. Gao Ze, Mr. Federico Biggio.
Yes,
please.
Gao a été déjà présenté, donc the floor is yours. Merci.
But the biography of Gao Ze, you have the abstract, the biography?
Mm.
Do you hear us? Okay, nice. We heard you.
Perfect. So I'm very glad to hear and give the presentation, talk about my research. I'm an artist. Also, I'm an arts researcher, so I'm concentrating the VR, AR, and metaverse. So today, my topic is about the interaction design and the digital VR exhibition. Okay, so
c'est son animation.
Okay.
Do I need to give a puzzle for the translator, or I just keep talking? Is okay. So okay.
Yes, it's okay. Thank you.
I'll take
Sorry.
Talking. So today's topic I was present is symbiosis, synchronized multi-user interaction in the digital VR exhibitions. And so the keyword of today's presentation is about the museum experience. We are an interactive system and metaverse. And so try to imagine this kind of like situation when we visit this kind of online museum and set several paintings and artworks hang on the wall. And you go there, use the virtual website or virtual VR lens and to take a tour, and you'll never remember anything about the content of the exhibition. Definitely, like during the COVID-19, a lot of people have this kind of experience when they visit this kind of online virtual museum, whatever use the web VR or the VR headset. And so this is the reason why we have this kind of motivation to propose our research. So, and try to imagine that like some of the people, when we're doing the interview for the whatever artist or general audience, some of the people, they want to like go to the virtual experience or the physical experience by themselves, stand alone. And they want to not communication with others, try to concentrate in the artwork. But some of the people like to concentrate like communication with their friends, like multi-visitors, and to talk about this painting or talk about this artwork is good or not, and how to do the interactive or something like that. So between this kind of two situations, some of the people really enjoy to go to the exhibition by themselves, but some of the people may really enjoy to go to the museum or the virtual space with their friends. So we have a research gap right now, is how to make a balance between the single player like exhibition tour and the multi-users online exhibition tour. So the theoretical base of this research is about ludic interaction. So let me give an introduce about what is a ludic interaction. This item is to talk about, is from the game theory, to talk about like how to use this kind of gamification to improve the user experience in the virtual space. So we are aiming to break the rules of physical exhibition visiting, try to improve more user experience. And the method that we are using is a synchronized communication between these multi-users through the object. And here is some example about like recently research about serious game and gamification of the museum. This is also the part of the theory of ludic interaction. So, and all of the aims is trying to improve the playful in the virtual space. So, and to talk about a synchronized multiplayer, I give you guys a really interesting example. And I believe all of the people, when you go to the physical museum, you definitely have this kind of experience, especially in the opening ceremony. And they have a notebook, and you guys definitely can take a note or writing something about the comments and write down some interesting comments about this exhibition. So this is a simple version of a synchronized communication because you write down something. And after 2 days, and your friends is coming and see your name, see your signature over there. And this is a kind of a simple version of a synchronized communication. So there are also in the industrial and the game theory has this kind of really good example. And first is the dot source. I believe some of the people played this game before. And because this is an online version of the game, and you can see some other players when they achieve this kind of task, and they have this kind of the shadow of these multi-users to play this kind of task. So this is a really good example and how to mimic another users in this virtual space. So there are some other games like Rush 2 is also have this kind of a synchronized communication in the game themselves. And so our research question is how to create a sense of other visitors' presence in the standalone exhibition. Definitely, like there are some famous platforms during the COVID-19 is getting really popular. For example, the decentralized critical voxel, they have this kind of a multi-user, and all of the real-time communication is still based kind of open your microphone and talk in the sequence. So how to improve the user experience and asynchronous communication is become a really interesting tool. So here is some workflow, and for example, the visitor A and visitor B and visitor 3 in the dynamics exhibition, and they can we co-design with artists and visitors. And we can have this kind of interaction with the environment, also interaction with the exhibition, which means the object and the exhibition object, like artworks. And also the asynchronous co-design with other visitors. So let me make a conclusion. There are 3 different functions in this kind of workflow. The first is the virtual audience can interaction with the object, which is also the exhibition artworks. Also, the visitors can interaction with the virtual space, like the environment, like print something or talking something, leave some note in the virtual space. And also, we can synchronize communication with other users. So this is the reason why we talk about multi-user synchronized communication. And when we're doing this kind of implementation, and we try to interact with the exhibition, which include the 2D paintings, like 2D patterns and 2D to 3D transformation, here is a little bit markup, and we can easily see, and the people can use their own avatar to get into this virtual space to communication with artwork and have some interaction functions. For example, the paintings, sculpture, and use kind of liquid pigment to paint something on the artwork. Definitely at this time, a lot of artists will see, like in the virtual space, why you can paint on other artists' artwork, that is not really good. But to be honest, this can also, the exhibition is not means like, the exhibitions themselves is artwork. During the people to get into virtual space and play with the artwork, this is also a kind of like artworks themselves. For example, the people knows in the MoMA and Jackson Pollock's gallery, a lot of like AR artists occupy that gallery space with a lot of really interesting AR work without official permission. So I think this is a kind of like contemporary art can give us this different feeling. So this is the implementation process. I'm not really gonna introduce this part, but I will try to cross the virtual and the physical and use the method like ludic interaction and VR, AR metaverse and 3D emoji and synchronized design. So, and this is the sense that I just mentioned before, and you cannot really paint on the artwork in the physical gallery, but in the virtual gallery, definitely you can do that. Also, you can leave your comments. For example, here is some of our design. Like you can leave some hurt and sheet or something on the virtual artwork, which is the same function like the Facebook, has a like and dislike function. So also a really good example about Yui Kusama's famous exhibition about the infinite mural. And during you get into this physical space, and the people give you a dot, because the dot is a symbol of Yui Kusama, and it has a really planned white space in the exhibition, and you can use your own dots to put on the sticker dots, put on the wet room. And at the very beginning, this is a planned wet room without everything, and after 2 weeks, a lot of visitors come, and the space is being really colorful and interesting. So also this process, it helps the audience out, the visitors, it's become the part of the curator, it's become the part of the exhibition, so which is also a really good experience. So to talk about synchronized communications, here is also have a really interesting like examples. Definitely you guys have this kind of experience. And maybe you guys see some famous sculpture, and the people will touch the part of the sculpture, and the part of the sculpture being touched for several times, it's become really shiny, which seems like the pictures that I showed you guys. And so for the implementation, and here is some example that we are trying to develop in the system. And the first part, we can use kind of authoring toolkit, and it has paint like bubble gum. Also, you can use 3D emoji like shade and like to make a comments for the artwork. And also, you can use the bubble gum to put some bubbles or some paint on the sculptures, which is like the right side has the sculpture, and also this is my own 3D artworks. And the people can use this kind of bubble gum to paint on artworks and also leave the comments. And here is another example, but we are not really finished this part, but we are starting to consider about when the virtual visitor get into this physical virtual space, and definitely they have a lot of data, which is include the position data and like how many times you stay in front of the virtual artwork. So this kind of user data, we also can collect this data, use this data to doing some like authoring to artworks, generating artwork, like use the data to generating some sculpture, or using this kind of user data to generating some 2D artworks, like growing artworks, which is also a really good experience. Try to involve the users, not only as visitors, it's also a part of the art exhibitions, part of the creator. So I think here is my presentation about our research. So this research is still on the development, but it's a really good opportunity to give this kind of presentation, get a lot of interesting feedback from you guys. So do you guys have any questions?
Thank you very much, Gao.
Not yet. Perhaps
Not yet.
We have with us Noor. Noor, do you hear us? And Arina. Est-ce qu'on peut remettre le son sur la sortie Zoom?
Non, là.
Okay. So, Noor, are you there? We are on WhatsApp together.
Yes.
Okay. So, welcome in Paris. Federico Biggio said something about your biography. And for the translator, Warina Alba is online with you. So we have to decide by WhatsApp. You speak slowly, and Arina translate in French for the Zoom rule, and from here in Paris. Is it okay for us? Okay.
I will just
Stenfert.
pause in between.
Yes. Noor Stenfert Kroese. Yes.
Exactly, Mr.
Okay, welcome, Noor. I hope to say well your name. Stenfert Kroese is a new media artist, scenographer, and artistic researcher. From a critical post-human perspective, her works evolve around the relationship between human and non-human in a special performative installation. Beside her artistic practice, she also is a university associate for the Department of Art and Science at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. And her talk is entitled Zoe.
Zoe is a piece installation of Noor. So welcome in Paris, Noor, and is it okay for you? Are we enough to translate in real time?
Yeah, she's speaking, she's saying a few sentences, then I stop.
Okay.
She stops and
Okay. We decide.
we do it consecutively.
Okay, we decide that by WhatsApp as the 9 evening. We heard something about the 9 evening this morning, so we have the loud technology. We have loud technology at the French National Library. So welcome, Noor, and thank you so much to accept my invitation and the invitation of Federico to do, perhaps to connect scenography story to the contemporary virtual universe, a metaverse, and your works with a connection in symbiosis with nature. So,
thank you very much. And also thank you very much to invite me to talk about my latest work, Zoe. Well, you already introduced me, so I will skip over that part.
J'ai été déjà présentée et merci beaucoup de m'avoir invité à vous parler de mon travail Zoé.
I create spatial performative installations that explore the relationship between humans and non-humans. Where I'm currently mostly focusing on data storytelling of living organisms. And I do this by using sensors and robotics to explore the unknown aspects of these organisms. And I aim to create tactile human experienceable outcomes out of this.
J'ai fait mon travail, c'est une coexistence entre la nature et les êtres humains à travers un système robotique. Et j'explore aussi les possibilités de communication interne entre ce système robotique et des organismes vivants.
And I'm very excited that we're today discussing scenography from its versatility and basically as an expanded form of scenography, as Polieri already dared basically to apply this concept of scenography outside of theater in relation to other art forms. I would even like to bring it, or to suggest it even further, to also not only focus it on the human, but also the relation to the non-human. Because for me, scenography arises in this encounter between space-time and human, as well as non-human activity and behavior. And looking at this activity and the location where this activity takes place creates for me performance through the application of scenography.
C'était un peu long. It was long.
Should I do it shorter?
Yes, please. essayer de faire un résumé, mais je crois que j'ai oublié quelques éléments. Donc, elle pense la scénographie en tant qu'une relation entre les êtres humains, l'espace et aussi la nature. Et c'est intéressant pour elle de montrer ça, comment on peut utiliser la technologie entre des différents écosystèmes. Je crois que j'ai oublié des choses parce que c'était un peu trop long, mais je crois que c'est le centre de cette partie, c'était ça. Yes, we can go on.
For me, it's also new to not continuously just naturally talk, but pause myself. Yeah, so in that sense, I see scenography as the process of transforming a space into a meaningful environment that leads both the performative actor, which can be human and non-human, and the visitors through basically a spatial experience.
Oui, je vois la scénographie en tant que transformation de cet espace et à travers la participation aussi des organismes et aussi des performeurs. Et je vois ça je vois la technologie aussi comme une possibilité, un autre élément qui peut être transformateur de cet espace.
And I will focus today on this work, Zoe, that I made in collaboration with Amir Bastan. And Zoe is a temporary coexistence between the reishi mushrooms and a custom-made robotic system, which you also see already on the slides.
Et ce travail, il a été développé avec l'artiste Amir Bastan. Il s'appelle Zoé, comme vous pouvez voir. C'est une coexistence entre les champignons reishi et le système robotique qu'on peut voir, peut-être que vous le connaissez déjà. Et c'est aussi, justement, c'est l'interaction entre cette partie de la nature et la technologie et l'être humain.
And we created this work in the end of 2022 during a 1-month research residency in Theater Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And the work built on an earlier work that is also part of this year's ICEA called RISA.
Ce projet, il a été développé en 2022 à Rotterdam lors d'une résidence. Et aussi, il y a d'autres projets qui sont pensés dans la même, dans ce même concept. Et cela a été a été développé pendant 1 mois. Vous pouvez voir les images. Yes, sorry.
Raisa and Zoe are both inspired by the research into the communication and trading behavior within mycelium networks, also often called the Wood Wide Web. And scientists do not know what the communication of mycelium networks really involves. They only know that it exists and that trading behavior takes part.
C'est l'interaction, les deux, Zoé et Raisa. Et ce sont des projets où on voit comment communiquer, comment les scientifiques peuvent communiquer avec les mycéliums fongiques. Oui, pardon.
Yes. And for me, these mycorrhizal networks embody basically ecology's most fundamental principle of the relationship between organisms.
Et ici, on peut très bien analyser l'interaction entre des organismes.
RISA that you see here on the screen is an interspecies connector that invites you to become part of the communication between the mycelium and the pink oyster mushrooms that are growing on the outside.
Donc ici, on est invité à faire partie de cette interaction et partie du développement de ce champignon et qui vous pouvez voir très bien. Ce sont les roses qui poussent là sur le mur. Donc on peut voir très bien l'interaction et on est invité à faire partie de ce développement.
And the oyster mushrooms and the mycelium, they are continuously exchanging biodata through very small electrical signals. And for this work, I created biosensors that pick up these electrical signals and translate them into vibrations, which you can feel when you stand with your bare feet on the dried mycelium floor pads that you see on the floor.
On peut voir sur le sol les champignons qui reçoivent des vibrations électriques et qui vont pousser et qui vont être développés à travers ces vibrations. Vous pouvez voir comment ils poussent et c'est une interaction qui est faite à travers des senseurs. Oui.
And after I worked on this work RISA with the sensors, and I did some other work with robotics, basically Zoe, the work what we will zoom into, came as a sort of shower thought to me, because I thought, if you have these electrical signals which are in communication form, could there not be a form of internal communication between fungi and a robot, knowing that they basically use a similar quality or materiality to communicate?
J'ai pensé à cette communication à des signes électriques et ces vibrations entre les robots et les champignons comme une partie de la communication. C'est une communication qui se ressemble beaucoup. Donc j'ai pensé, est-ce que c'est possible de faire les deux communiquer à peu près de la même façon? Et c'est ça le travail qu'on a fait sur Zoé. Oui, il y a la production de ce signe, de ces vibrations électriques pour le développement les robots, ils se communiquent de la même façon avec les champignons.
And for me, it felt also like almost, or it is often seen as a paradox, this like nature versus technology. And that is why I wanted to see, like, if you combine those two, could there occur an ecosystem that cares for and affects each other through sensing technologies?
Et donc, on a toujours ce paradoxe en tête qui est l'opposition entre la technologie et la nature. Mais ici, j'ai essayé de combiner les deux et voir comment on peut avoir un système qui collabore et pas qui est opposé l'un à l'autre. Donc, c'est ça l'idée principale quand j'ai pensé à l'interaction entre les deux. Et on a vu qu'on a un système qui a une communication qui est complémentaire.
And I think a big inspiration for this work is that after RISA, Professor Andrew Adamatsky, the director of the Unconventional Computing Laboratory of the University in West England, published in early 2022 a paper called The Language of Fungi Derives from Their Electrical Spiking Activity, where he proposed that basically the language of oyster mushrooms, or in general also reishi mushrooms, that they are very complicated, and that he thought already to have found 50 words in their exchange of signals.
So there was a paper, il y a eu une étude, un article produit par le professeur Adamatsky de l'université en Angleterre, qui a identifié 150 mots différents dans la communication des champignons Reiza et Reishi, et qui montre qu'il y a cette communication qui est aussi qui se développe à travers l'électricité. C'est comme des signes électriques entre eux et qui ont vraiment comme des mots et à travers lesquels ils se communiquent. Ils s'expriment aussi. Yes.
And basically, you see on the pictures, you see how we're trying to create this system. And I think the best way to show you what the installation became, because we focused and very much on this non-human interaction as what the space around such a non-human interactive place should be, or how that can invite humans to take part. So I would like to show you the video where you can see basically in the installation and how it works, and then we continue with the rest of the presentation.
Elle va montrer maintenant la vidéo où ils ont créé cet environnement sans l'interaction et après avec l'interaction des êtres humains.
Let me know if the sound is not coming through.
Est-ce que vous entendez le son? Ici, on n'a pas. Oh yeah. Ça marche maintenant. Yes, oui.
Zoe
Not
is a
anymore.
temporary coexistence
Ah, yes.
between Reishi mushroom and a custom-made robotic system. Zoe is created in 2022 during a one-month research at Productiehuis Theater Rotterdam. Our future cannot be one where technology is in opposition to or destruction of the natural environment. Without claiming that we know what nature wants or needs, Zoe creates a possibility of unknowns coming together. It continues into the research of the interaction within fungal mycelia networks. Scientists discover that fungi transmit information to their network using electrical impulses. To this day,
Ils sont
they
tous
do not know
isolés.
what this communication is. It is the curiosity of what happens when we do not assume the outcome or interpret it through thinking, but give it space to be with and experience it. Zoe explores the possibilities of an internal communication between its robotic system and the reishi mushrooms. Within this seeming paradox between nature and technology, an ecosystem occurs that cares for and affects each other through sensing technologies. Zoe collects data to sensors in the environment and the mycelium of the reishi. It also collects data through observation with cameras. It uses this data to create the internal
Utilise des
communication
caméras,
between the
utilise
reishi and the
aussi
robotic
des
system.
signes
Within the
électroniques,
system of
des
Zoe, the
sensors.
reishi and the behavior defined what the robotic system did. At the same time, the robotic system was influencing the shape of all the reishi. As the robot arm puts the light source above
Le
the
système
reishi, it is
robotique
defined by the system
va
as the one that
influencer
needs extra
toute la
care. It
communication
also triggers the other reishi in their behavior.
des champignons.
Reishi is a light-sensitive mushroom,
Il y a aussi
and they are
l'utilisation des
growing
caméras.
towards the light. They grow towards the other
Ils
reishi
poussent
that needed
vers la
extra care.
lumière.
Over time, creating a reflection in the shape of the fruiting bodies of the reishi and how the other reishi were doing in relation to each other in this ecosystem. The data are also used in the space to create a sensory experience to explore the activity of Zoe. In the space around the big cube is on every corner a tufting frame. On these frames you can see the camera view from inside of Zoe and
Ici, on peut
real-time
voir
data
les caméras
visualization.
qui montrent
For also streamed 24/7 on YouTube.
chaque écosystème et ils sont surveillés 24 heures sur 24 heures, 7 jours par semaine.
On a daily basis, we collected the data from Zoe as the input for these data carpet visualizations. The data we are getting is the reishi in relation to their environment, to see if we could experience any correlation between them. Each ring of the visualization is connected to one part of the data, reishi activity A and B, humidity, temperature, and CO2. The rings get distorted in a ratio to the activity of the data, how often this data comes in and how much it differs from the minimum and maximum calculated daily. These tactile data visualizations are created as a way to keep exploring Zoe's outcome and the unknown communication going on in this temporary coexistence. Zoe is inspired by the concept of philosopher Rosi Braidotti. Simplified, the suggestion is to replace the idea of life understood as human life with Zoe, all forms of life, which questions us about repositioning our way of taking part in this world. Instead, from the perspective of us humans being on the outside, looking to the rest as if we're not part of it. Zoe places everything, including us, in relation with the others as part of it. For Zoe to happen, we must search for a new we. What kind of new we do we experience when it is not about us? All right. I hope you could hear the video.
Oui, j'espère que vous avez écouté, que vous avez bien vu la vidéo et les images et les caméras et tout ce qu'on a fait sur ce projet Zoé.
I wanted to show you shortly what I also explained in the video, but then in a data flow, how we try to build this system of the internal communication between the reishi and the robotic system.
Ici sur la vidéo, j'ai expliqué comment on a construit ce système où on a créé un écosystème en fait pour observer et analyser toutes les données de la communication entre les mycélias, les réseaux mycélias et les réchis, et comment on les a surveillés et qu'est-ce qu'on a découvert en tant que résultat.
So we have been looking for a way that within Zoe, the system of that that in the system of Zoe that the Reishi and their behavior defined what the robotic system did, and the other way that the robotic system was influencing the shape and the health of the Reishis based on what they got back from the Reishi.
Donc on a vu que le système robotique, il a influencé la communication et aussi comment cette communication, elle a envoyé des informations à ce système et comment on a pu mettre les deux en relation et aussi avoir les données de la communication et comment on a pu analyser toute cette communication.
And because the signals are an input we basically do not know what it exactly means, we needed other factors to help us understand what the situation was within the chamber and the situation of the Reishi. Therefore, we decided, apart from the biosensors for the signals, to use 3 other sensors. Sorry.
Pardon. No, go on.
And visual data. So we had a camera on the robotic arm and on the outside of the chamber to monitor the Reishi.
Donc on ne savait pas ce qu'on pouvait observer. Donc on a mis des caméras pour dehors et aussi dans les chambres qu'on a construites pour les champignons. Et donc, on ne savait pas vraiment ce que les biosenseurs pouvaient nous donner en tant qu'information et que données. Donc, on a beaucoup de données visuelles.
And as you see here, we were monitoring the growth because that is a very clear factor. And also, we wanted the system to focus on having care and attention to these needs. So the robotic arm would constantly get the sensor data in, but every half an hour it would make pictures of every group of Reishi to compare it and choose basically which group needed the most care and attention in that moment.
Donc on a eu des photos prises à chaque 30 minutes qui nous montraient quels étaient les besoins de chaque groupe et on a pu comme ça surveiller tous les groupes et comment ils poussaient, s'il y avait des groupes qui avaient moins ou plus besoin de tel ou tel facteur.
And by knowing which one needed the most attention, the arm was above this one, but the arm also consisted of a light and a humidifier. So as Reishi are light sensitive, they started growing towards the light, and therefore you see in the bodies of the Reishi a reflection of the situation in their ecosystem. And basically you can see where in the space the ones were that needed more attention or more care from the group.
Donc on a pu observer qu'il y avait des groupes qui se développaient moins. Donc on a commencé à augmenter soit l'humidité, soit la lumière, et on a vu que les champignons ils commençaient à pousser dans le sens de la lumière. Donc on a vu qu'il y avait que comme ça ils étaient plus équilibrés, ils pouvaient pousser selon la tension entre guillemets qui était nécessaire qu'on a pu observer. Donc on a commencé à tester et à s'adapter aux besoins de chaque groupe et pouvoir aussi, et comme ça on a pu observer comment il se développait et s'il se développait moins ou plus selon les changements des conditions.
And this work was very much focusing on the Reishi robotic system, but in the same time, I was looking basically for our place in this installation, because where was I as the human involved in creating this together with Amir, and also how to keep space for the visitors in a place that is not about us.
Oui, donc moi et Amir, en tant que humain, on a pensé à cette création, à ce système-là, et aussi le système robotique pour le faire pousser. Mais on a pensé aussi à comment faire les visiteurs participer de cette installation, comment le faire observer. Donc on a créé tout ça, pas seulement pour les champignons, mais aussi pour que les gens pouvaient interagir et aussi observer toute l'installation.
And therefore, we search for a way that Zoe creates, with the input it has in the system, also a space around itself of sensory data visualizations, which opens up a way to relate to this unknown fungi communication that is going on within Zoe.
Donc, on a eu les systèmes robotiques et les senseurs aussi qui ont pu pousser et aussi influencer, et aussi la construction de tout cet environnement et l'observation de tout le monde autour des colonies, disons, de l'installation. Et comme ça, on a eu une participation humaine et aussi une observation avec des systèmes robotiques.
And I wanted also to be able to tune in on the different speeds and rhythms of basically all the different actors involved. And also to find a way of how to experience this unknown data, because we don't have any idea. Therefore, I decided to make these real-time data visualizations, which is constantly showing what is going on. Also having a live stream so you can look back over a longer time. And in the same time, I placed me and Amir in the place by making these carpets, which was almost a way for us to relate of how to make this unknown physical, and also put it physical in the space when you really can feel the visualization and not only just see it.
Donc on ne savait pas vraiment, on voulait voir le développement des champignons, mais on ne savait pas vraiment quelles étaient les données qu'on allait avoir. Donc on a voulu créer cette expérience sensorielle où on pouvait observer, on pouvait aussi sentir et voir la communication, comment elle se donne. Donc on a eu ce tapis de données, disons, où on a pu collecter quotidiennement tous les facteurs et tous les éléments du développement. Pas seulement des éléments visuels, mais aussi on a eu d'autres résultats, comme par exemple la communication et plusieurs autres facteurs qu'on a découverts tout au long de l'expérience.
And we also used headphones for the audience so they could choose themselves. Do they want to explore the space on their own, or do they want to be guided, where they would hear me and Amir talk about Zoe and how we worked on this system and how we also saw our own place in this system.
Donc, on a aussi utilisé des casques pour pouvoir écouter. Donc, les visiteurs, ils ont pu choisir s'ils voulaient explorer cet environnement seulement d'une façon visuelle, si aussi ils voulaient participer d'une façon aussi, ils pouvaient écouter quelque chose. Quel était le type de participation qu'ils voulaient choisir en tant qu'observateurs?
Because Zoe is also an interactive work between these non-humans, we use a lot of these sensing technologies and data as a material to create these encounters between them and us, basically. And I believe that requires a quite responsible and careful process regarding the non-humans creating, providing, and representing this. So we also try, that's why this space is quite soft, is to bring people in an awareness of the other, which is both sides in the case of Zoe.
Donc, on a aussi voulu créer cette expérience plus tactile et une expérience entre les humains et la nature d'une façon plus complète. C'est un projet pour justement explorer plusieurs types de sens et aussi la connaissance, la conscience de l'autre. de la différence de l'autre et de la différence des espaces.
And as I mentioned in the video, the idea of Rosi Braidotti to create a new we, that is basically including all of us, begins with starting to ask herself what it means to take responsibility and care as a core principle. And can humans give space to non-human entities to claim a part of the new we, also in a scenography?
Donc, Braidotti, il a pensé à la création d'un nouveau nous, et qui nous fait penser, est-ce que les êtres humains, nous, est-ce qu'on peut donner l'espace à d'autres organismes, à d'autres types de vie et d'existence? Et en pensant à ça, on a pensé aussi, on a eu besoin de créer cet environnement, de respecter, de l'observer. Donc, c'est une expérience qui va justement penser à nous faire avoir conscience de l'existence de l'autre, pas seulement l'autre être humain, mais aussi les autres types de vie et d'existence, et de nous dans ce système où nous sommes aussi nature et partie de cette nature et des différents types d'environnements.
So to round it up, I think for me it was very interesting to bring this more installative work back into the theater, where I also work in a more traditional way, sometimes still as a scenographer, because it questioned during the residency also the theater on topics like what is theater and what does it mean to have non-human performativity in the space, and how scenography can basically create a base for this new way of making theater.
Oui, et donc dans cette conscience de l'autre et qui est l'autre, qui est cet espace, on a pensé à la scénographie. Et j'ai voulu justement, en tant que scénographe, ramener cet espace et ces différents types de vie et de penser à une nouvelle coexistence dans le théâtre et penser à un nouveau théâtre et quel type de théâtre on peut avoir en explorant d'autres types d'environnements, d'autres types de sensations et d'autres types d'existence et d'expérience.
And I think there is
excuse me sorry for the interruption. We have to conclude in a few minutes. So
yes, I'm almost there.
No, sorry. Thank you very much.
With the translation.
Okay.
It's slower with the translation.
Yeah. So I think there's a huge advantage bringing these kind of works, which are often in museums, to the theater, because it is placed in a space where we take care of the material quality and the objects and the environment. And I believe that these type of more performative installations can become a more substantive and sensory exchange between the scenography and the participants, in which they basically become co-makers.
Donc ce type d'expérience, ce type d'espace, il va créer de nouvelles interactions et de nouveaux types de spectacles, de nouveaux types de scénographie, et ça va aussi penser à de nouveaux types de matériaux et de créations qu'on peut avoir dans le théâtre et dans d'autres types d'art et d'autres types de spectacles.
And I think one of the core strengths is because it really involves bodies and organisms and objects and materials. And I think this way scenography opened up a space to ask questions, and we need space to ask so many questions that need to be experimented on and experienced with and elaborated on. And Zoe, I think, is one of the experiments to find ways of living together while being different and also embracing these differences and working from all these different qualities of those involved as a sort of proposal to redefine our society and in general maybe the shared space we create with each other and where we live all together.
Donc Zoé a été un projet qui nous pousse vraiment à poser beaucoup de questions, à poser des questions, comment on utilise l'espace, comment on crée des interactions, comment on peut coexister et comment on peut transformer des nouveaux types de l'interaction et aussi les nouveaux types des spectacles. Et c'est important aussi de voir comment on peut coexister avec des types différents et de la diversité.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Noor, for your intervention. Yes, with the real-time translation, it could be hard, but we would like to have some time to debate. Maybe si quelqu'un a des questions entre le public, ou si vous n'avez, Franck. In truth, since the intervention by Chris, I started to think the issue of immersivity, which is one of the, I think, one of the fil rouge of the free intervention. However, it is also one of my topic of interest. So I am sorry for this, but if I have to find some kind of a question for both of you, and I was wondering during your intervention about the transformation of the sense of immersivity that we know, which is often related to realism, plausibility. Often it is linked to a visual dimension of experience, and while in your works, in your research, you put the attention both on interaction with technical objects, non-humans, but also natural objects. So I was wondering how did the sense of immersivity changed in this project, in these artworks, as in my opinion, when we question the issue of theater, the context of theater, of performance, we find a difference between the immersion with others, which is the issue of the project of Gao, but we know that immersion for a long time, nowadays also with virtual reality and so on, is often viewed as a solipsistic experience, no? I think it's just a line of thought, but what do you think about it?
So first of all, the term immersion has been, as you can see historically, has been going on for a long time. I mean, when you look at you might think in the end of the 19th century, when Richard Wagner is the first to turn the lights down in the theater in Bayreuth, in the Bayreuth Festspielhaus. Other theaters were doing this as well, but he's the first to kind of put it under his name. You suddenly have, you're sitting in a dark room. Before that, the theater was usually bright. If you go to Roman theaters, if you go to Greek theaters, if you even go to theaters in Japan or in Indonesia, you're usually in either you're lit with candles or torches or flames, or you're in broad daylight. So when Wagner turns out the lights, the auditorium, the theater, the theatron, this place of seeing, dims, and you only see the stage. And what Wagner does is he makes the stage a flat image. It's very far away from you, and then he dims the lights in the space. And in fact, in Bayreuth, in the Festspielhaus, you have an orchestra pit which is sunk, so you don't even see the light from it. So he called it a mystic gulf. There's a dark space that goes to this almost flat image, but in the space, the audio, the sound is almost three-dimensional because of the way it's designed in terms of its fan shape, in terms of underneath the seats, it's hollow, so it's a resonance chamber. So immersion in that sense is a total control over the environment that the audience experiences. That's what immersion really is in that sense. It's about a kind of, and it's a technical control in that sense. It's a total mediation. So when we talk about immersion now, people think, oh, that it has to do with like painting the walls with images, you know. But that starts also, and as you see with Polieri, it starts in the 1940s, 1950s, and certainly 1960s. If you go to the World Exhibitions in Brussels, in Osaka, in Montreal, the environments are filled with multi-screen projections. So to say that immersion is a new idea is a kind of historical myopia, you know, in that sense. So the interesting thing is what's different. When we talk about immersion in virtual reality, you have to understand that computer scientists use that term in a very specific way. They mean surrounding the eyes with images in 360 degrees. And that starts with technical systems like the cave in the 1990s, and then stereoscopic vision, and then, of course, the histories in the media arts in the 1990s are about this kind of total surround of images. You know. The most interesting experience for me of immersion was being in Japan at No Theater and watching for 8 hours this slowly unfolding ritual, which I had no idea what was going on. I mean, I know these plays, but I didn't know this is an old Japanese. Everything is moving at such a glacial, slow pace, c'est très, très, très lentement, that you fall into a trance, and you lose the sense of the environment you're in. And this is the interesting thing about immersion, is that the distance between your body and the environment you're in disappears. And so your sense as and as you pointed out, Federico, what's really important is that these are social experiences. They're not individual atomistic experience, solipsistic experience alone. So cinema, theater, certain kinds of social immersive, these are all social experiences, you know. So immersion is, you have to understand, and of course there's politics around immersion. There's a lot of politics around immersion, which no one really wants to talk about. But the minute you could totally control the environment, you construct a state of spectacle that shapes the viewer's or experiencer's perception to an n degree. And that's the world we're in right now. So what does digital systems make possible that those analog systems did not? An absolute precise control over the way images look, the way they unfold, the way you hear sound. All these things are really key to what we now call immersive environments or immersive experience. But that will start to shift. So, you know, the minute that immersion becomes essentially the shopping mall, which essentially it is, you know, you could say La Salle is a very immersive space, right? Then you have to start to question what really this is about.
Thank you very much. Really, I think also the use of the term, the concept of entanglement, stay in this thought. I don't know if on Zoom there are some questions. Ze or Noor, would you like to?
Ze and Noor, and after we close the first session of the afternoon. After, if Noor or Z want to have a reaction about the question of Federico, Noor, perhaps about immersion. Are you there, Noor?
Or
have you something to tell to us about the immersion, the concept of immersion in your way, perhaps?
Well, yeah, I think that is quite a big part that we were looking for in this work. Is like, how do you immerse the visitor or the visitor in a place that is essentially not about them. And that was also in the process quite interesting, because during creating this work we invited at different points different people into the space to also see how they responded and reacted And I think with the current notion of immersion and interaction, people are very much tended to, that they always want to do something. They always want to, the moment they have the feeling it could be an interactive space, or there is actually an interactivity in the space, that they should also be able to change or to decide or to create the space. And I found it very interesting to see what it did to the audience, or how we could bring the audience in a state of being part, being immersed, but not being leading or deciding, but really daring to listen and not be basically the main character. And that kind of immersion asks for, I think, a search in our approach on how to do this and how to bring people in this state of immersion.
Ze, perhaps, before to close.
If not, we close. So, thank you very much, Ze, Chris and Noor, for your talk. And now, if I... est-ce que je peux retourner en français?
You can speak in French or in Italian if you prefer, no problem. You can speak in Italian, and we could speak Spanish.
Si je me souviens, on a un petit pause, et après on reprend. Ah non?
Non,
parce que nous sommes en retard, c'est vrai.
Excusez-moi pour les personnes qui sont sur Zoom en anglais. Excuse me for my bad English. Chris, thank you so much. Noor, Ze, and Chris and Ze, we will be heard you during this week at Forum des Images for ISEA. I spoke about that this morning, and very strange beginning of this afternoon, because we have a free proposition, free generation, back to the history of scenography in resonance of some talks from this morning. And for me it was very important to invite Noor, because we spoke this morning about John Cage, and I said that John Cage is more interested by mushroom than 9 evening. You know that, Chris. Yeah. And with Noor, we are not the post-John Cage, but we hope, excuse me for my English, we hope perhaps, and this morning we have with Matthias, the linguist from Buenos Aires, who introduced the alphabeto and the notation between tango, practice. And so before Matthias, we heard something about not the classical scenography, but of course avant-garde, historical avant-garde scenography between performance and of course Artaud and Kissler. I spoke very much about Kissler. And we are in research, we have no answers there. It's many things to open. One thing, the most figure of Jacques Polieri, some people forgot that, and the title of this panel is in relationship with a book of Jacques Polieri, Jeux de communication, games communication. But after the time, it's not just a game of communication about the technology. It's not like Wagner. Polieri is very against Gesamtkunstwerk. But it's not that. It's a connection to be in life, to be brave, to be in performance, but not that performance contemporary. I know that you are in the same thing about that. And so, with a mushroom and perhaps with a virtual room with Gao Ze and you feedback from the historical scenography, it's open another point after this morning. So we don't know what is exactly the language of scenography for us, and perhaps of Polieri, but we have, on first point, one history, one archive, some books, and some people in research. So I'm very happy to be there in Zoom and